Hey everybody, welcome back to Laser Engraving 911. So on this episode, we're gonna do a little project together and I'm gonna show you how I use the ComMarker Omni 1 5-watt UV laser, the Lighburn Galvo Grip Rotary, and Lightburn to do some engraving on these shot glasses, but not just a logo on one side, a logo on one side and the opposite side as well at the same time. This tutorial will walk you through the steps on how to set up a dual side engraving on any tumbler or cup that you want to engrave using your ComMarker Omni 1 5-watt UV laser or fiber laser for that matter. So if that sounds like something you want to get into, then buckle up, get your pen and paper out, because we're about to get into it on Laser Engraving 911. Okay, so first things first, you're gonna need some tools if you're working with a rotary and you're gonna be doing cups, tumblers, shot glasses, whiskey glasses. So you're going to need a set of calipers because you're gonna need to do some measuring. You could just use your calipers or you could get yourself a straight ruler as well, if that's helpful if you have like a longer tumbler to do. The other things you're gonna need is a fiber laser with a chuck style rotary. But for this tutorial, we're gonna be using the ComMarker Omni 1 5-watt and the Galvo Grip by Lighburn. I'll list links to both of these in the description below. I love how these two things pair together because I was able to plug in the Galvo Grip right into the back of the ComMarker Omni 1 5-watt UV laser and just program in the correct settings. I didn't have to use like an external driver board. I was able to calculate the direct settings. If you want a great tutorial on how to do that with your rotary, I'll list a link in the description below of this video. It's directly from Lightburn and it tells you how to calibrate your rotary for your fiber laser or your UV laser. No matter what model it is, it's all the same. So now that you know what tools that you're gonna need to have, let's dive into Lightburn and I'll show you some of my settings that I have set up for doing these particular shot glasses, and we'll talk you through them. So the first thing you wanna do if you're working on rotary stuff is you wanna make sure that you go in and you turn your rotary on. By default, this is usually off, so you wanna make sure you enable your rotary. You can take a look at my screen here. You can see how I have my split size set up, my overlap, and then these steps per rotation are specific to this rotary that I have set up. So just keep that in mind. Don't copy these numbers because you may have a different type of chuck style rotary. You're gonna wanna put in the diameter of the object that you're working on. So that's really, really important. Whatever you're gonna put in here, you need to take your caliper and you need to measure the diameter of the area of the cylinder that you're gonna be working on. Now, these shot glasses are a little bit tapered, but that's okay because we can actually tilt this rotary up and down, which is really cool to make sure that this plane is straight before we start engraving. And I always measure the area where the engraving's gonna go. So I already measured this and you can see it's 44.5 millimeters. So you wanna put that in there and it automatically figures out the circumference for you. All these other motor speed settings are something that is already in there for this rotary. And if you can adjust those depending on what type of rotary attachment you have with your system. So now that we've gone in and enabled the rotary and set up these settings right here, we're gonna click OK. Some of the other things that I wanna point out is the way that I like to engrave on glass or do engravings. And these are a little bit more advanced and there's varying reasons why you might not want to use my settings, but this is what I like to do. And let me go ahead and walk you through that. If you notice, these are my settings for this particular machine. And you'll notice a couple of things that I have turned on that are really important. So what I like to do is I like to actually turn on cross hatching when I'm doing glass engraving. You can see my line interval, my lines per inch, and my scan angles at 45. You notice I had flub fill turned off, but I do have fill shapes individually turned on. So go ahead and take a screenshot of these settings if you want, and just kind of record those for later when you're doing glass engraving, because that's what these settings are for. Now, we haven't even gotten to the fun stuff yet. As soon as I hit start, I want you to notice some other things right here. I've got my split size, my overlap, which we already went over, and I've got my object diameter set in, which you can see right here. But I also have run hole shapes if possible, with the max shape being at 25 millimeters. What is that gonna do for me? So that's gonna allow me to use my cross hatching effectively, and it's going to go letter by letter as it goes by, as long as that's underneath 25 millimeters, instead of doing lines and lines and lines and lines and lines, it's gonna work on each section of the graphic at once, and it's gonna enable to quickly do a crosshatch of that section of the graphic. And you'll see that when we actually run some of these jobs. I really like working that way when it comes to glass engraving. I feel like it's faster than doing, you know, just split lines back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And if I can get away with doing it, that's great. Now, that doesn't always work if you have parts of your graphic that are more than 25 millimeters, so keep that in mind. But for most applications, it works really, really well. So now that you've looked at my final settings for this, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this tutorial, which is how to set up graphics in Lightburn for Galvo, where you can engrave a logo on one side and a new logo on the other side of the cylinder that you're working on, because that's really what this tutorial is about. All right, so what are we looking at here? So this is not the copy of Lightburn that's on the Com Marker Omni 1, but what it is a nice big work area, so I can tell you how I set up this file to engrave on both sides. So let's talk about what we're looking at. So here we got the shot glass at size, and we know that I took my caliper tool and I measured the total height of the shot glass, which was 57.831 millimeters. I measured the diameter of the area that I was going to engrave right here in the middle, and we came out to 44.5 millimeters. Then we got the circumference, and the way we got the circumference was very easy. We just took the diameter and times it by 3.14, which is pi, and that will give you the circumference. And the circumference is the full engravable area. If you were to split that shot glass down the middle or down one side and then flatten it out, that is your total area that you could possibly engrave, like if you were going to do a full wrap or anything like that. So the circumference is full engravable area opened up and laid flat. Just trying to keep it simple here. So we've got the height, the diameter, and the circumference. These shapes right here, this shape right up here represents the total engravable area and the height of the shot glass, which we already determined. And what I did down here, now this is how I chose to do it, and it worked really, really well, was I took my total working area and I split it down the middle and created two squares that, when put together, make this shape again. And I put a little guide rail in here, which we'll talk about in a second. Now, why did I make two squares? I made two squares so I could easily take my logo that I want to put on the front. I hold down Shift, select that first square, and just hit the target button to center it right in the front of the shot glass. Then I took my other logo, hold down Shift, selected the back of the glass, and hit the target centering icon. So now I know that this is the front of my shot glass and this is going to be the back of my shot glass. Cool, right? So we really don't need any of this anymore. We're just going to select all that, move it aside for a second just to get it out of the way. So now that we have this graphic here, we're going to take this back over to the Com Marker Omni 1. And we're going to load it into Lightburn, and we're going to turn it in the orientation that your rotary is set up as. And you saw how my rotary was set up. And then we're going to get rid of this box, and we're going to get rid of this box, and we're going to leave this just like this. And then we're going to set up the shot glass, which I'm going to show you how to do. And we're going to engrave both sides of the shot glass. The cool thing about this little tutorial here is the steps that I just showed you will work for any kind of tumbler that you can fit in your rotary tool. They're the same steps for whether you're doing a shot glass or a Yeti cup or whatever, if you want to do both sides. Now, you might be thinking, what if my graphic goes outside my workable area on Lightburn because I only have so much of a working space? Well, when you're in rotary mode, and I'll show you this, it's totally okay for your graphic to go long ways outside of the work area because you're in rotary mode. It will not try to engrave outside of the working area, which is pretty cool. So once again, you can use this method for doing double-sided engraving no matter what kind of tumbler or glass you're working on. So let's go back over to the com marker and I'll show you how this works. All right, we're back over here at the UV com marker station. And before we dive into Lightburn and show you that file that we just created, I want to go over the rotary and how I set up this Galvo grip rotary with the com marker Omni 1 and some little tips. So let's jump over here and I'll kind of show you some of the tools that you're going to need right here and how I set up my rotary for excellent results. So there's a couple things that I want to go over before we start engraving the shot glasses about the Lighburn Galvo grip and how I like to set it up on the com marker Omni 1. So if you notice right now, it's not bolted on, and I do have some pieces of tape here, and those are to remind me basically where I like to place it. But if you notice on the bottom here, they have these really nice T-slots. So there's lots of different ways and places that you can place the rotary on your com marker Omni 1. And that is dependent on what you're engraving. So if you had like something really long, like a tumbler that you wanted to grip, you'd probably have to set it back here because you always want the general engraving area to be right underneath the lens of the com marker Omni 1. Same for fiber laser. So you wouldn't want to mount your rotary over here and you wouldn't want it too far here. You want to kind of size whatever you're engraving so you mount your rotary almost, if you can, directly or as close to underneath the lens as possible. So the laser doesn't have to shoot out over here or shoot out over there. See, I know for these shot glass jobs, I actually put this piece of tape right here to remind me where to put it because it puts the shot glass right underneath the lens of the laser. But another thing that I want to share with you, as another tip, is how to make sure that this is perfectly aligned in the right axis. And one trick that I like to do is you want to get yourself something long like this piece of copper pipe here. And what you do is you just set this in here, tighten it down so it's nice and straight, not crooked. You want it to be something really straight and, you know, it could be thinner than this and you want to level it off. So you can do that by turning this little knob here, right? You want to get it nice and level. You can use your little spirit level, lock that in, and then you want to get it in the position that you're going to be using your rotary. And what you want to do is on the screen in Lightburn, you just want to draw a line that is perfectly centered in your workspace, just like this, right? And then you want to project that line using the frame feature. And if you can't see it, you can use a little bit of UV Pixie Dust, which I'll list a link for in the description below, right? And you can just dust it a little bit, put that on there. And you'll be able to see the laser light, and it might help if I turn the lights off. And you can see that line clearly now. And what you want to do is you want to position that line that we can see right there directly down the center of that rod that we put in there. And if you've got to look at it from different angles, you know, take a look at it from far away, look at it straight on, but you want to make sure that that's positioned nice. And also it kind of projects over here and you can see that it lines up with the center position right here on the top of the Galvo grip rotary. So once that's lined up perfectly down the center, nice and straight all the way down, you can go ahead and lock in your rotary in the position that you want to lock it in at depending on what you're doing. So that's my little trick for making sure that the rotary is nice and straight and that all my engravings will come out straight. So once you've got that straight, it's time to lock in your rotary. And it's going to come with some little pins like this that you are just going to match up right here, and you're just going to use those T-slots and you're going to tighten down your rotary. And they've really thought this through. You've got multiple slots to go ahead and tighten this down right in place so it's not going to move, which is really important. And you're going to tighten the base down, and now that's locked in. I can go ahead and release this and we can stop projecting that line now because we know that we're perfectly straight on ready to start engraving right underneath the lens, which is exactly where we want to be. Okay, now let's talk about how we're going to grip the shot glass. So we've got the shot glass here. We could open it up all the way and move these fingers into the position to grab it on the outside, but we don't want to do that. And we definitely don't want to grab it this way. We want to actually press out with the rotary and put the fingers on the inside. So I've got the little fingers configured all the way into the center position, and I'm going to put this shot glass, and if you can see right here, it actually butts up flat, and that's really important because the flat rim of the shot glass hits right there, so we know we're nice and straight and we're nice and flush up against the rotary, which is great. So now that we've pressed that on there, I'm going to slowly open up the rotary here until those fingers are pressing on the inside of the glass, nice and tight. Don't be shy here. This glass is pretty thick, so it's nice and gripped there. It's flush up against there, which is what we want. Now we need to level off shot glass, and you can see it's not currently level. So we're just going to take this, we're going to loosen up the level adjustment, and we're going to raise it up until our spirit level says that we're level. I'm going to hold it there, and then I'm locking it back in place. Now we're perfectly level. So these are really handy. You gotta have these when you're doing rotary engraving. All right, next step, focusing to the surface of the shot glass. Extremely important. So let's do that. Okay, you guys probably know this about me now, but I don't use autofocus. I don't use the little red lasers that are up here to focus. I don't trust that. I make my own focal sticks. If you guys want me to make a short video on how I make these focal sticks for each one of my UV lasers or fiber lasers, let me know and I will make a video on how to do this. So this focal stick represents my perfect focus from the bottom of the lip of this lens to the surface of whatever I'm engraving, and it doesn't fail me. It's always correct, but I had to go ahead and figure out what that distance was. So leave a comment below if you guys want me to make a video on how I calculate the distance and make my focal sticks for each one of my machines. So we're going to use this now and focus to the surface of the shot glass. So I'm just going to hold it right here, and since the Com Marker Omni one has automated Z-axis, I'm going to lower it down till I get close to the surface of the glass. I'm not going to do it all the way. I'm going to get close, and then I'm going to manually, I know you can't see this on camera, use the tower to crank down until the tip of this focal stick touches the surface of the glass. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it back and forth to see if it's just touching the glass all the way. And I can see that I need to come up a little bit right here. And now it's perfectly focused along the surface of this glass. And I'm going to focus down just a little bit, and I'll explain why when we start engraving the logo. So I'm perfectly focused to right here, but I focused a little bit past it, but there's a very important reason why, and we'll talk about that in a second. Now I think it's time that we move over and check out our file in Lightburn and get these shot glasses engraved. All right, so we just finished our focusing, so we don't need that anymore. Make sure that you have an excellent pair of rated laser safety glasses before you use your class 4 UV laser. Just a little public service announcement there. I'll list links below on where I get mine. And now we're in Lightburn with the file that we created over at my desk earlier. So let's take a look at it. All right, so we imported our file with our bounding boxes that we created, which were exclusively for just centering our logos. And we've got our logos in the middle. You can see there's 2 separate bounding boxes, and we don't need those anymore. So we're gonna go ahead and delete that, and we're gonna delete that. We don't need those, but we do want this. This is just a tool path, and you can see that it's here called out as a tool path, and the framing is on. And then also you can see my 2 engraving files right here that we're going to do the front and the back, and those are also assigned to my glass settings. So why don't you take another look at these glass settings so you can lock these in and keep them. This is what I like to do my rotary engraving with this glass setting, and any crystal or glass setting for that matter. So you can go ahead and freeze frame this, keep it. But for this particular job, I want you to notice not just the settings, but that we do have crosshatch turned on. And I want you to know that we are going to check fill shapes individually. This is really important. So make sure that that's checked, not flood fill, but fill shapes individually. All right, So we verified that our settings are correct for this particular job. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to hit the frame button. But before we do, I want you to notice the reason I put this little box in here. That is so we can see where we need to register on the glass when I do the framing feature, because it's going to project this box, but it's also going to project this logo and the text on the back, but we won't be able to see it because they're off of the shot glass. But this little box right here represents the center of the circumference of our full graphic, and where we'll be able to see it on the shot glass, so we can move up and down, because it also aligns with the top and the bottom of these logos, and we can shift with the arrow keys back and forth to make sure that these graphics are perfectly aligned on our shot glass. So let's go ahead and project that now. And of course, you can't see anything because we don't have any UV laser pixie dust on there. So let's go ahead and put that on there, and I'll get up close so you can see how I use that center box to line up this graphic on the shot glass. All right, so you can kind of see the projection mark here, but that's because I've got all the lights turned off and the camera's boosting it. But in reality, you're not usually going to be able to see that. So that's why I like to use a little UV pixie dust so I can see that center box that we're projecting right there. And it really helps me understand where the graphic is on the glass. So you can really see that now. What that allows me to do, now that I have a little bit of UV dust, which just gets wiped off, is I can move using the arrow keys up, left, or right, depending on which direction I want to go, to make sure that my graphic is on the area of the shot glass that I want. I don't want it to be too low, and I don't want it to be too high. So that's why I like to use a little bit of UV pixie dust to make sure that my alignment is just right for this job. And once I'm done, I can just wipe that off. Now that we've got that all lined up and I know that my graphic is right where it's supposed to be, there's just two more things before we start engraving these shot glasses. So you want to have really good fume extraction set up. So I'm going to bring my hose right up next to the area where I'm going to be engraving, and I'm going to go ahead and turn on my fume extractor. For those of you that are wondering, I'm using the FilterBox Micro. Excellent unit. I'll list a link in the description below for that. I actually use the FilterBox Micro with a splitter and some blast gates, and it does all the fume extraction for my fiber laser and my Com Marker Omni 1. We just use the blast gates to open and close depending on which vent hose needs to get the exhaust. It's pretty cool. I'll have to do another video on that soon. So we got our fume extraction in place. You want to get your laser safety glasses on before we start lasering these shot glasses. And then all that's left to do is wipe this little UV pixie dust off and start engraving. So let's get into it. All right, let's see how we did. We've got our logo on one side and our text on the back, perfectly centered. Just the way we liked it, because we mapped out a nice little template to do front and back engravings all at once. All right, let's see how we did. We get a little backlight so you can actually see how nice these came out. Really, really nice. Perfectly centered with the text on the back. I love the way the Com Marker Omni 1 5-watt UV laser engraves glass with these settings. Because we're using cross-hatching, we're actually hitting it each letter twice with 45-degree angles, which gives you a really nice deep engrave. Could you do these faster? Yes, with one pass, but I really like the true engraved setting that I get with these settings that I just shared with you. Let's check out the other one. Yeah, just really consistent. Even the fine little lettering underneath Chabad there came out nice. And one of the things I wanted to notice is you notice that on the logo here at the top, it actually did that all in one pass using those crosshatch settings. That's because I set that logo to be under right under 25 millimeters. So it did it all in one pass. Even though we focused right to the top here, do you remember I focused down? That's to compensate for the little bit of curvature that was right there. But the Com Marker Omni 1 stayed in focus even with that curvature right there. So while UV lasers are very particular about their focal points, you still can get away with the Com Marker Omni 1 UV with little curved surfaces and stay in focus and get great engravings like this. All right, let's go wrap it up and I'll give you my final thoughts and tips on engraving glass with the Com Marker Omni 1 and the Lighburn Galvo grip. All right, well, that about wraps it up for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed my tutorial on how to do dual-sided engravings on tumblers with the Com Marker Omni 1 5-watt and the Lighburn Galvo grip. This combination right here has been a game changer for my shop. Ever since I got the Com Marker Omni 1 5-watt, we use it literally pretty much every day here in the shop, and I've had it for quite a long time now. It's never let me down, and the fact that it works plug and play with the Galvo grip is amazing. I know that it can be a little intimidating to start working with rotary with your fiber or your new UV, but I'm here to tell you that with the power of LightBurn and the power of a good rotary tool and setting up your graphics in the right way using the method I said, you can definitely speed up your workflow by doing both logos at the same time instead of doing one logo, turning it around and setting it back up. I've listed links to everything we used in this video down below. I can't thank you enough for watching, and we'll see you around on Laser Engraving 911.